Welcome back to HQ Spotlight. We're going to turn down the NBA talk for just a minute and pivot to the Eagles, because it feels like ages ago when we were celebrating that Super Bowl championship earlier this year. And you know the old phrase, defense wins championships. That was certainly the Philly mantra en route to that championship. In fact, take a look at the numbers. Eagles, one of three teams to have four different players with 50 or more pressures last season. That list also included the Broncos and the Rams, and that number also includes the playoffs. Of course, that is all by design. If you look at the draft over the last few years and what Howie Roseman has been able to do, their pass rush success dates back to that draft in 23 when they took Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith out of Georgia in the first round. All four of these pass rushers, by the way, when these guys are in the mix, Philly got 43% of their pressures, 56% of them on third downs, and 62% in the Super Bowl. All of that to say is they certainly have the winning formula, the blueprint, if you will, for success on defense with just 15 days to the NFL draft. Let's see if we can find some success for some other teams as we welcome in our NFL crew of Mike Renner and Pete Prisco. Guys, let's start with Denver. They hold the 20th overall pick as well as picks 51 and 85. But when you think about the Broncos, kind of synonymous with defense here, they had the second highest pressure rate and the fourth highest blitz rate last year. Zach Allen, of course, a big reason for that. Mike, do you think when they approach this draft in a few weeks here, do they continue to build the defense, or do they maybe address another area with those picks?
I think they're going to go at least one playmaker. They need to, they owe Bo Nix that after how good his rookie season was and how little they gave him. But I do think their path to success is to make this the best defense in the NFL. And of all the teams, of all the rosters right now that can challenge the Eagles for that crown, the Broncos is the one that I think is the closest, because it's every single level now with what they did in free agency, adding Dre Greenlaw, adding Talanoa Fanga, and the fact that they were already close last year, the second highest pressure rate of any team in the NFL. You add maybe one more interior piece to that puzzle, and I think they just go wave after wave of defensive linemen capable of putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks. This Broncos team, it's a great draft to draft a defensive lineman. I think they should add one in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. I think they still need to get a little more help up front. But when you look at that team, they do it differently than the Eagles do. I mean, this is a blitz-heavy team. The Eagles are not. And ideally, you might love to be able to get pressure without being able to reinforce the blitz. And I think that's something they're going to have to adjust to. I think they can get better at it. But you look at the great defenses over the years, they've rushed the passer without being forced to blitz. I mean, the Cowboys back in the day with Jimmy Johnson, the Giants when they won their Super Bowls. I think that's the ideal scenario, is to try and blitz less, get better players. And I think Broncos could add one more edge rusher maybe to the group, one more down guy inside. Not early, because I think they're going to draft a lot of offensive players, but I do think they need to add some help up front on that defensive front.
They did have a franchise record 63 sacks last season, but to your point, Mike, they got to have some playmakers if they're going to score points going forward. Let's talk about Green Bay next. They're picking at 23. They love using that four-man pass rush last year, gentlemen. They had the second highest sack rate when they did so. But, Pete, obviously Jordan Love would certainly love some help on offense. What do you like for the Packers to do with their picks?
Well, they also have questions in the secondary. What do you do at corner? I mean, what are they going to do with Alexander? And if you don't bring him back, do you address that? Because I think the pass rush and the secondary go hand in hand. They upgraded the safety spot last year. I think they could use help on the corner, and I think they will address that early in the draft. But you're right. You go to the offensive side of the ball, you have major questions at receiver. So you look at it, you say Watson's coming off the injury. You have Romeo Doubs had concussion issues, and was there truly a number one wide receiver? It got so bad that they started asking questions at the owners' meetings to Matt LaFleur about, hey, maybe your number one receiver could be your tight end. You okay with that? And look, they need to get help at wide receiver. So wide receiver, I think they need more help at the edge, and I think they also need somebody at the corner.
I will say, though, in the Brian Gutekunst era, they have not really been a need drafting team. They have drafted for value, and they've drafted premium positions. They drafted Jordan Love before they needed him. They drafted Lucas Van Ness before they needed him at defensive end. They drafted Jordan Morgan last year in the first round before they needed him. So I think they're going to continue that, be forward-looking, and especially in, again, a massively deep defensive line class. They like to address valuable positions. Already have 4 first-rounders along that defensive line. Would not surprise me if they added a 5th.
Yeah, they certainly know what they like and how to get it. We've seen it in drafts previously as you take a look at the numbers there. Let's move on, though, and talk about the Texans' defense because it just seems that that's been their strength as of late. They extended Danielle Hunter in the offseason, so that's certainly a plus there. They also get Will Anderson, who just continues to elevate each and every season. But, gentlemen, how about the offensive line? I mean, the sacks, it just seemed like C.J. Stroud couldn't stay on his feet enough. Pete, do you see them using their pick for a defensive player to help bolster the defense, or are we thinking O-line here in Houston?
Well, not early, I don't think. But again, this is a deep draft when it comes to the defensive line. It's not a deep draft when it comes to the offensive line. And so if you're sitting there in the first round, they think they upgraded their offensive line. They didn't. You know, Cam Robinson, not an upgrade over Laramie Tunsil. I think the guys they got on the inside, Ed Ingram, not an upgrade over what they had last year in Shaq Mason. So they still have work to do on that offensive line. It was the major problem of the team last year. So, yeah, the defensive line could use another big body in the middle of the line, but I think they need to address the offensive line early and often in this draft. Get some big guys, get some bodies to protect that quarterback. Remember, 2 years ago we were talking about he's on the way to being the star quarterback. Now there are questions about him because of the offensive line. So fix it, move forward. You haven't fixed it yet, despite what you might think. Get some draft guys, get an early pick in this draft, maybe Booker, the guard from Alabama, somebody along those lines. Upgrade the interior of that offensive line.
I am right there with you, Pete. I think they need to address this offensive line. But the thing is, at pick 25, you can't always get a starter. If Tyler Booker's gone, there may not be a starting interior offensive lineman there for you. And then if you're drafting an offensive tackle, well, you don't necessarily need one with Titus Howard and Cam Robinson now. So, yeah, it's not a good offensive line by any means, but I think it opened themselves up to go elsewhere if value presents itself. And the position I'm looking at is defensive tackle. Because you have one of the best edge duos in the NFL, Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter. If you just had anyone creating some pressure in the middle of that defense, all of a sudden it takes this defensive line through the roof. And there's some good defensive tackles in this draft class. I know Pete loves Derek Harmon from Oregon. I love Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. One of those guys is on the board. I'd be happy as heck to have him at pick 25.
You know, Mike, you talk about maybe not having an offensive lineman there, but with the guys that they have at tackle now, they could be one of those teams that does the luxury pick on Josh Simmons. I mean, you could look at it and say, you know what, Josh Simmons to me is the best offensive lineman in this draft. I think he's, you know, if it was just play and he was healthy and there weren't the issues about maturity, he'd be a slam dunk #1 offensive lineman in this class. So he's coming off the torn meniscus. There's concern there. There are maturity issues. You hear that around the league. There's concern there. But if you're the Texans, you might draft him, and he might be your plug-and-play left tackle for the next decade and protect that quarterback. So I think they might have a chance to make one of those luxury moves in this spot.
Sounds like you guys have been talking to Kyle Long a little too much there on the O-line train there. But listen, they need it. C.J. Stroud could not stay on his feet. Let's continue the conversation with the Rams. They have 3 picks through the first 3 rounds. They begin, of course, with pick number 26. The defense, gentlemen, really took a step up there in the postseason. They had 16 sacks alone across those 2 games, good for just over 21%, the highest in NFL history. A lot of it came from their rookie duo of Jared Verse and Braden Fisk making early impacts. Mike, when we look at the Rams here, do we continue to build on the defense or maybe replace Cooper Kupp here? How are we feeling?
I think early on they're probably looking offense, but the beauty is of this Rams defensive line, outside of Jared Verse, all these guys were day 2 picks or day 3 picks. Like it is not a premium position defensive line because they don't take the height, weight, speed guys. They don't necessarily need the length that other teams do with the way they scheme that defensive line up front. It's just guys who can create havoc. So in this class, there's a bunch of guys to me that fit that bill that would be great Rams defensive linemen that will fall down boards because they maybe don't have the length or don't have this other trait that teams usually covet. The Rams just covet, can you get up the football field and get into backfields? That's how you get 16 sacks in the postseason a year ago in only 2 games. So they were getting better as the year went on. I think if they had one more piece, they are in that mix of one of the best defenses in the NFL. But I do think it starts on offense. You got the wide receiver duo now with Devontae Adams, but I think that offensive line or even another weapon would go a long way for Matt Stafford here.
See, I look at their defense and I say, okay, they added Poona Ford. He's a nice up-the-field guy. He's a good defensive lineman. I think they're okay up front. But you look at the back end. They got a lot of expiring contracts, 1-year deals at the cornerback position, and they're not great there. Darius Williams, just okay. Akilla Witherspoon, just okay. I think they need help at corner. I think they should look there early in the draft. And another place they need to look, speed. You look at that offense, and I know they brought Tutu Atwell back, and you know what? And Sean McVay, I love the way he handles his interviews. He admitted, look, we don't use him enough. We don't get him involved. Well, if they do get him involved, then the next thing I say is probably a moot point. But they need somebody who can fly. They need somebody who can take the top off. You look at the receivers they have. Puka Nacua doesn't do it. You look at Devontae Adams, he doesn't do it. You look at their running game, Kyron Williams, he doesn't do it. They lack speed. And when you lack speed, teams can defend you a bunch of different ways, and it makes it a lot easier on the defense. I think speed at receiver and corner are their priorities in this draft.
Yeah, I would love, and maybe first round's a little rich, but Kyle Williams, the Washington State wide receiver, feels like the perfect third wideout to be that vertical threat for them. But I'll push back on your going defense and cornerback specifically, because they just play so much zone. They devalue the cornerback position, just the way they scheme it up. So if they're going to go anywhere in the first round, I think it would be on the defense side of the ball. I think they'd keep investing in that D-line.
We'll have to see how it shakes out. Meanwhile, in Detroit, we know the big story there was that they missed their star, Aiden Hutchinson, for most of the year. So I'm sure they're excited to have him come back. But even in their absence, gentlemen, they did okay on the defensive side of the ball. The third highest pressure rate with 4 pass rushers rushing. What's going to be the key to success when it comes to getting their star back, especially, Pete, when you think about the fact that they had to replace both of their coordinators in the offseason?
Well, let's not just forget that it's not just Hutchinson. It was Lee McNeil on the interior got hurt, and he was one of their best inside pass rushers. They were decimated by injuries last year. And look, losing Aaron Glenn, that's a big hit to their defense. But I'd rather lose Aaron Glenn and have healthy guys on the defensive side of the ball than have Aaron Glenn and have him be coordinating the defense that doesn't have healthy guys again. I think getting Hutchinson back, if he's the same guy, and we always have to say that. You'd like to think he will be, but you never know with a guy coming off an injury. He looks good so far. There's been some tape of him running on the field. He looks like he's healthy again. And if he's back, that changes the dynamic of their defense. They don't have to blitz as much. And I know Aaron Glenn loved the blitz. He would blitz anyways, but when you don't have a guy like Hutchinson being able to rush the passer or McNeil being able to rush the passer, you're forced to blitz more than you would like, even though you're a blitz-heavy team. So I think the key to that defense is how healthy are they, particularly with Hutchinson.
Yeah, 100%. They just need these guys on the football field. We really never got to see what full strength this would have looked like last year. And I think we forget just how dominant Aiden Hutchinson was prior to that injury. Like, he was so far and away the defensive player of the year through the first 4 weeks of the season. It was not even close. He had 18 more pressures than anyone else in the NFL, truly at a level that really only we've seen Myles Garrett get to in recent years. If that guy gets back, I mean, I don't care about Aaron Glenn leaving. I could coordinate that defense, and with that defensive line, give you a top 5 defense.
Let's get Mike Renner on a headset and on the sideline for the Detroit Lions this season. Gentlemen, we appreciate the time and the insight. Enjoy the offseason, because we'll be doing this every day in the near future. Make sure you check out Pete, Mike, and the whole crew on Pushing the Pile. JJ, our insider Jonathan Jones, actually joined the latest episode to break down owners' meetings and all the changes coming up in 2025. So make sure you scan that QR code or listen wherever you get your podcasts.